Whenever I hear Tucker, I listen to him, there does seem to be it kind of reminds me of like a failed romantic.
I think that probably he would agree with that on America's foreign policy. I mean, he talks about this openly about, for example, the war in Iraq, but I think that he's been critical of pretty much every American foreign policy decision since World War II, including World War II. I mean, really, including World War II, right? I mean, he has on guests who have said repeatedly, not just one, multiple guests who have said that either America took the wrong side in World War II or the true villain of World War II was Winston Churchill. He himself has said, what did Churchill actually gain? Because now London is a terrible place, which is sort of like saying that there's litter in the streets of New York, therefore the Enlightenment was bad.
There has been much talk about Tucker Carlson and trying to understand why a man who has such talent, who was so successful with Fox and then went on his own, is using his platform that has become so controversial. Let's watch this together with Ben Shapiro as they talk about it, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. Kindly subscribe to our channel so a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness.
We talked about Tucker, and one of the things is quite clear that, as you say, there's been a direction of travel change very significantly since he left Fox and started doing what he's doing. He's hosted a whole number of people that clearly are pushing a particular worldview. I think that's fair to say. What do you think he's up to with that?
I don't like to attribute inauthenticity to people, so I will assume that it's reflective of his actual worldviews. I think that, just looking at the guests that he's had and sort of the views that he has laundered, because that seems to be his mode of doing business. It's that he very rarely says the thing that he wants to say out loud. A few times he will. Like, for example, in the Fuentes interview, he'll say that Christian Zionists have a brain disease, right? That's him actually saying the thing that he thinks, then sort of trying later to half buy it back as he realized he crossed a politically inconvenient line for him.
I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, Christian Zionists. Like, what is that?
Right.
And I can just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody. Because what? Because it's Christian heresy, and I'm offended by that as a Christian.
But mostly what he does is he has on people, and then that's fascinating. That's very interesting. Now, of course, Tucker is perfectly capable of carrying out a very adversarial interview, as he did with, for example, Ted Cruz. And so pretending that he's not doing that thing is, I think, insulting to the intelligence. And the right would not accept it in any other context. If a reporter has on Kamala Harris and asks her 0 difficult questions except how brat she is, then we are rightly going to assume that reporter is pro-Kamala Harris, right? And it's not doing their actual journalistic job, and you can sort of intuit views that way. Guest selection is definitely a big one. How you treat your guests is a big one. We can sort of intuit the views. I think that the Tucker's general belief from looking at the way he has done his sort of foreign policy talk is that it's not just that America's overextended, it's that America is a sort of nefarious force in the world, and wherever American support for allies happens, then it must be the result of domestic manipulations, and that the most important thing right now is to essentially go autarkic, to bring, I think this is the most charitable read, to bring, American resources home, to not be involved in the world in any way, and most importantly, that anybody who opposes this agenda is a tool of a foreign agenda, or is a malign actor, which is the thing that differentiates, I think, some of how Tucker does his business from others. I think Tucker is very fond of using emotivism, where he attributes motive to people in order to not even debunk the argument, but simply to just say, they're a bad person, they hate you, they want to hurt your children, and I despise them. I despise them comes up a lot on his show, which I've always found kind of strange. Like, I don't know why that's an argument. Why are your feelings even sort of relevant to the point that you're making? It's a sort of strange political take. I despise. I mean, who cares? And I despise lots of things. I mean, broccoli is not my favorite. Like, of what relevance is this?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. And whenever I hear Tucker, I listen to him, there does seem to be it kind of reminds me of like a failed romantic. He had this romanticized idea of America and what America was. He's now fallen out of love. And like a guy who's gone through his first breakup, he looks at his girlfriend and goes, oh, she's a massive bitch.
I mean, I think that I think that probably he would agree with that on America's foreign policy. I think he talks about this openly about, for example, the war in Iraq, but I think that he's been critical of pretty much every American foreign policy decision since World War II, including World War II. I mean, really, including World War II, right? I mean, he has on guests who have said repeatedly, not just one, multiple guests who have said that either America took the wrong side in World War II or the true villain of World War II was Winston Churchill. He himself has said, what did Churchill actually gain? Because now London is a terrible place, which is sort of like saying that there's litter in the streets of New York, therefore the Enlightenment was bad. It's like, clearly he thinks something went fundamentally wrong with the West around the time that World War II happened. And, you know, why he's saying that and what is the viewpoint that defines that? I think he's sort of left that undefined, so I'll leave that undefined. All I'll say is I think that it's untrue. I think that some of the views, many of the views of the people that he brings on run counter to traditional American conservatism at the very, very least.
Mm. Look, the brilliant thing about social media and podcasting is that there's no gatekeepers. The terrible thing about social media and podcasting is there's no gatekeepers. And when you look at people like Tucker and you look at people like Candace, when they were in large organizations and they had to report to people, there were guardrails and they couldn't go off the reservation. Whereas now they can go off the reservation and we've seen what's happened.
I mean, again, I think that it's not even a matter of gatekeepers as much as it is of a willingness to sort of be checked by people and listen to maybe better judgment. Because I think that there's a case to be made that many of the gatekeepers have sucked and getting rid of some of the gatekeepers was good. But I think that what is required of consumers of information now is significantly more than was required of consumers of information 15, 20 years ago.
You have to be your own gatekeeper now.
Yeah, and most people are not really good at that. It's not even a matter of qualification, it's just they're not very good at it. Because again, you're consuming information like a fire hose, and it's coming at you on social media from an algorithm that I think is quite perverse in places like X or on Reddit or wherever you are, TikTok. And so unless you are a very informed person to begin with, it's very difficult to know what sources to trust. And that's when you get into a bit of confirmation bias. And that's where we get back to sort of the original point that we were making, which is the people who pander most strongly to your sensibilities, which is that you have been wronged by some sort of conspirial coterie of people who are aiming to crush you underfoot. That's a very flattering idea, because then the idea is that you're not responsible for any of your own actions and that all solutions are just simple if only you had the power to implement them.
And you also get incentivized to create this type of content, because the more of this kind of conspiratorial content, let's just call it that you make, the more likely people are to engage with it, because they're thinking to themselves, oh, this is interesting, this is dangerous, I want to hear what he's
well, secret's being uncovered. Whenever a secret is being uncovered, that's much more interesting than somebody saying, hey, there's no secret, everybody's bad at their job. which, by the way, is actually significantly more accurate. In virtually all circumstances, people are just not good at things who think they were going to be good at things, and then the results are bad. But it's much more sexy if you say, no, there's a nefarious secret. There's a group that meets in secret and they get together just to fuck you. Yeah. Right? That's flattering to your sense of self. It's flattering to your sense of the world. And now you're part of an informed group of people who really know the thing that nobody else knows.
Well, that's very true. And I think another piece, and I wrote about this on my Substack, I don't know if you saw, but it was about what's happened to young men in particular over the last 10, 15 years, where we had this woke period where if you were a straight white man, there was dog shit, and then straight white men like a lot of levels below that. And particularly for a generation who neither created a system where men may have had some advantage or white people may have had some advantage, nor benefited from that. If you were a 15-year-old Zoomer, you were being told the future's female, all men are trash, etc., while actually your life outcomes and the education system, which was overwhelmingly not favorable to people like you that you were going through, you can kind of see why they're angry and resentful.
I mean, I totally agree why they're angry and resentful. And this, again, gets back to a point. Diagnosis is easy. Prognosis and cure is hard.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree that the sort of wokeism of the past 20 years has created, for example, the Fuentes movement. I mean, I talked about that openly on the show on Monday and in the piece that I wrote for the Wall Street Journal, is that basically the sort of woke left idea that white Christian men in particular were the scourge of the earth and thus had to be extirpated from public life, or at least disadvantaged in public life by the sort of Ibram X. Kendi. The only way to fix the injustices of the past is to engage in injustices in the present. Like, I can see why that would drive a sort of white Christian identitarianism. I think that in order for that identitarianism to take place, it can't really be a Christian identitarianism, because Christianity, last I checked, and again, I'll let others who are more expert in this topic than I speak to this, is a system that distinguishes neither Jew from Greek nor slave from master. I mean, the idea is that all are equal like it's about individual equality was one of the key functions of Christianity. So you have to come up with kind of a pseudo-Christianity where, certain people are superior to other people. And I think that that's a really negative thing, which is why you've seen some systemic immunity to it among more traditional Christian groups, actually. But I think that the move that you see, it is understandable, but the normal curative to woke should be meritocracy. And that's a hard argument to make these days. Right? I mean, again, because meritocracy has an inherent suggestion, which is if you don't succeed, maybe it's at least partially or largely your fault. And that's a very hard sell to people. That's a very hard sell.
So when we realize that Mr. Ben Shapiro, who has been very outspoken, is a great conservative commentator, also being Orthodox Jew, means that he carries a responsibility to represent not just what his views are, but that it should be in accordance with what he represents. To see him walk around with his kippah makes us always very proud, because he's representing that he doesn't just talk the talk, but he also walks the walk. And that is the thing about traditional Judaism. So you're not just a Jew by virtue or by DNA, but you actually live the Jewish life. So when Mr. Ben Shapiro does his commentator, he realizes that he's being a voice that's not only his voice, but it's a voice that dates back 3,337 years. And I think every person should also think of it that same way, that when you have a voice, you are representing not just your voice, you're representing the past, the present, and the future. And what Mr. Ben Shapiro is saying is that we have known Tucker from his Fox days. And then when he left Fox and he began on his own, things started to change. He used to talk very favorably both about America and England and the West. But yet now he seems to have gone a total 180. So it's an interesting attitude that we all need to learn a lesson from. We have the ability, God gave us two eyes for a purpose. We can always see the best in everything, or we can see the worst of everything. And we need to be able to recognize and realize we're living in paradoxical times. We're living in times where we are literally in the most prosperous times. It's pre-messianic times. We're living in times that we are seeing miracles that we could have never imagined. Just such advances in medicine and travel and communication. And just thinking about the internet that was born in our generation, just think about how that changed the world. The other day I was driving from the airport and I plugged in my GPS and I thought about it. I remember when I used to have to use the Thomas Guide Brothers. Do you remember those books? The maps? That was our GPS. And when the very first Magellan GPS came to the world, it was such a marvel. We couldn't believe it, that there is something that's going to tell us where to go, how to go. So I thought about the idea of GPS. Why is it called GPS? It's not Global Position System. I think it's God Position System. We need to always remember that God is positioning us. King David wrote in Psalm 37, God decides man's footsteps. That's our GPS. Where God puts us, he puts us there for a purpose and a reason. Literally, when we wake up in the morning and we go about our day, we need to remember that what's happening is by divine providence. It's the way it's meant to be. There are no coincidences or accidents. Everything happens for a purpose and a reason. So if you find yourself in a certain situation, the very first thought you have to ask yourself, why am I here? What is the calling? What does God want from me? What do I do in this particular situation? And no matter what situation we find ourselves in, we always have to ask the same question and be ready for the answer. God put me here for a purpose and a reason. What is the calling? What does God want from me now? Certainly, God wants something positive to come from it. God expects each one of us to be ambassadors of good. That is the purpose of our creation, to be ambassadors of good. The day you and I were born, God said the world can no longer exist without you. So you have a purpose. There's a reason why you were born. Let's not squander away that reason. So when I think about Tucker Carlson and I think about the position where God put him, wouldn't it be for his legacy and for his life to be able to use his platform and his talents that God has given him to promote unity, to promote cohesiveness, coexistence, to go back to his original ways of recognizing and appreciating the gift that God has given us in our generation, the freedom and liberties that we have accomplished here in the United States of America came through 250 years of hard sacrifices, and we're here. This is not the time to go negative on us. This is not the time to help us grow and turn the page and into the 21st century, to take the gifts that our forefathers have given us and continue building on it and growing on it. They are the trailblazers. Now it's for us to walk through those trails. God bless you. God loves you.